Dr. Richard was a highly respected surgeon from New York, a man admired not only for his skill in the operating room, but also for his compassion and unwavering commitment to his patients. Despite the long hours and the high-stress demands of his job, he always made time for his wife, Laura, whom he adored. Laura was his anchor, his safe haven after the chaos of the hospital. To Richard, she was more than just his partner. She was the love of his life. Together, they had built a seemingly idyllic life, one that many envied. To the outside world, they were the perfect couple, successful, loving, and inseparable. But life, as it often does, threw an unexpected challenge their way. Laura began to fall ill. At first, it was just fatigue and discomfort, symptoms that could easily be dismissed as stress or a passing flu. However, as weeks turned into months, her condition worsened. Simple tasks became exhausting, her energy faded, and she was in and out of the hospital for tests and treatments. It was during one of these visits that they received the devastating news: Laura had a severe kidney disease. Her kidneys were failing, and her life was in danger. The diagnosis hit them like a thunderbolt. Richard, who was used to saving lives, now found himself helpless in the face of his wife's suffering. The doctors explained that without a kidney transplant, Laura's chances of survival were slim. The urgency of the situation left them little time to process the gravity of what was happening. For Richard, there was no hesitation. He stepped forward without a second thought, offering one of his own kidneys. His colleagues tried to caution him, reminding him of the risks involved and the physical toll the procedure would take on him. But Richard wouldn't hear it. To him, Laura's life was worth any sacrifice. "I'll do whatever it takes," he told her, his voice steady with determination. It wasn't just about being her husband. It was about the promise he made when he said, "In sickness and in health." The days leading up to the surgery were a whirlwind of tests and preparations. As a surgeon, Richard knew the medical complexities involved, but this time, he wasn't the one in control. Lying on the operating table, waiting to save his wife, was a strange and humbling experience. For the first time, he was the patient. The surgery went smoothly, and when Richard woke up, his first question wasn't about himself, but about Laura. Hearing the news that the transplant was a success and that Laura was already showing signs of improvement filled him with a sense of relief so profound, it brought tears to his eyes. In the weeks that followed, Laura regained her strength, her color returning, and her laughter once again filled their home. For Richard, it was all worth it. He looked at her and felt a renewed sense of connection, a belief that this experience would bring them closer together. He had given her not just a part of his body, but also a piece of his soul. In his heart, he thought their bond was now unbreakable, forged in sacrifice and love. What he didn't know was that the greatest pain was yet to come, because life doesn't always go as planned. As the months passed, Richard began to notice subtle but unsettling changes in Laura's behavior. The warmth that once defined their relationship seemed to fade, replaced by a chilling indifference. Laura, who had always greeted him with a smile and a tender kiss, now seemed preoccupied, her thoughts elsewhere. She began coming home later than usual, often with vague excuses about extra hours at work or catching up with friends. Conversations that once flowed naturally between them turned into stilted exchanges or, worse, silence. She avoided his gaze, her responses clipped and distant, as if being around him was a chore rather than a choice. At first, Richard tried to rationalize her behavior. He told himself that Laura was still adjusting to her new life after the surgery. The physical toll of recovery and the emotional strain of her health scare might have left her feeling out of sync. He reminded himself of the love they shared, reassuring his heart that this was just a phase, a temporary bump in the road of their marriage. But as time went on, the cracks in their relationship grew wider and harder to ignore. Then came the day that shattered Richard's world. It was a quiet evening at home, and Laura had slept off while in the middle of a text conversation. A message notification popped up, and the name on the screen caught Richard's eye. Steve from work. Curiosity got the better of him, and with trembling hands, he unlocked her phone, a part of him hoping to find nothing out of the ordinary. What he found instead tore his heart in two. The messages were intimate, filled with flirtatious banter and confessions of affection. Steve wasn't just a colleague, he was her lover. There were plans for secret dinners, affectionate nicknames, and even references to moments they'd shared in private. Richard's mind reeled as he pieced it all together. The late nights, the growing distance, the coldness, it all made sense now. Laura wasn't just distracted, she was living a double life. Richard felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. His chest tightened, and his vision blurred with tears he couldn't hold back. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a wound that cut to the core of who he was. He had given Laura more than just his love. He had given her his trust, his devotion, and even a part of his body, a kidney, to save her life. The depth of her betrayal was incomprehensible. She hadn't just turned her back on their marriage, she had trampled on the very foundation of his love and sacrifice. The woman he thought he knew, the woman he believed would always stand by his side, had betrayed him in the most unimaginable way. For Richard, it wasn't just a heartbreak, it was the shattering of his entire reality. Richard confronted Laura about her infidelity on a quiet evening in their living room, the same space where they had once shared countless happy moments. His voice trembled as he held up the phone containing the damning messages, his eyes pleading for an explanation. Why, Laura, after everything we've been through, why would you do this? He asked, his words heavy with disbelief and pain. Laura didn't flinch. Instead, she met his gaze with an icy calm that sent a chill through his chest. I won't lie to you, Richard, she said flatly. I've been unhappy for a long time. I've fallen out of love with you. Her words hit him like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of him. Richard stared at her, searching for a trace of the woman he had once adored, the woman whose life he had saved by sacrificing a part of himself. But all he saw was indifference, a cold detachment that made her seem like a stranger. After everything I've done for you, for us, you don't even feel remorse? He asked, his voice breaking. Not even an apology. Laura shrugged, her expression remaining unreadable. I didn't ask you to donate your kidney, she said, her tone cutting and devoid of empathy. That was your choice. Don't hold it over my head now. Her words pierced him deeper than the betrayal itself. The love he had poured into their marriage, the sacrifices he had made, now seemed meaningless to her. It was as though every moment they had shared had been erased in an instant, replaced by this unrecognizable person standing before him. Anger and heartbreak consumed Richard, swirling together in a storm of emotions he couldn't control. He felt like a fool, for trusting her, for believing their love was worth the sacrifices he had made. The weight of her betrayal pressed down on him, suffocating and inescapable. He knew there was no way to salvage what was left of their marriage. The decision to file for divorce came not from anger alone, but from a deep sense of self-preservation. Richard couldn't continue living under the same roof with someone who had shattered his trust so completely, who showed no regret for the pain she had caused. It wasn't just their marriage that had been broken. It was his sense of identity, his faith in love, and the foundation of the life they had built together. He realized, painfully, that staying would only prolong his suffering. Filing for divorce felt like tearing apart a part of himself, but he knew it was the only way forward. It was a step toward reclaiming his dignity, a chance to rebuild his life without the weight of a betrayal dragging him down. As he sat alone in their once shared home, signing the paperwork to dissolve their marriage, Richard couldn't help but wonder how it had come to this, a love story that had started with so much promise, now reduced to ashes. But as the legal process began, Richard made a demand that left everyone in the courtroom stunned and speechless. The man who had dedicated his life to saving others was now fighting for something deeply personal, a piece of himself that he felt had been unfairly given and betrayed. During the divorce proceedings, Richard addressed the court with a calm yet deeply wounded voice. He brought up the kidney he had donated to Laura, the very organ that had saved her life. Your Honor, he began, his words heavy with emotion. If she couldn't honor our marriage, she doesn't deserve the part of me I gave to save her life. The statement was not just a legal argument, but an outpouring of pain and frustration. For Richard, the kidney symbolized his unwavering love and sacrifice, something Laura had trampled on with her betrayal. The room fell silent. Lawyers exchanged bewildered glances. The judge raised an eyebrow, and Laura's expression shifted from defiance to disbelief. It was a moment no one in the courtroom would forget. The gravity of his demand reverberated through the walls. A husband asking for the return of an organ he had given out of love. Of course, the reality of reclaiming a donated kidney was not only medically impossible but legally unprecedented. The absurdity of the request wasn't lost on anyone, yet it underscored the depth of Richard's anguish. He wasn't just asking for a kidney, he was asking for justice, for a way to make Laura truly understand the magnitude of her betrayal. Realizing that his initial demand was unfeasible, Richard proposed an alternative, $1.5 million in compensation for the kidney. His argument was both logical and deeply personal. "My kidney saved her life," he declared. "It gave her a second chance, and this is how she repays me. If the organ cannot be returned, then let its value be acknowledged. Let the sacrifice I made be worth something." The courtroom became a media spectacle, drawing attention from every corner of the country. Social media exploded with opinions, dividing people into two camps: those who saw Richard as a heartbroken hero and those who labeled him bitter and vengeful. To some, Richard's demand for the kidney, or the monetary equivalent, was a desperate but understandable cry for justice. Imagine giving up part of your body to save someone you love, only to be discarded like yesterday's news, one supporter tweeted. He deserves compensation for what he went through. Others, however, found his request outrageous. A gift is a gift, one commentator argued. You can't put a price on love, and you can't ask for your kidney back when things go south. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was just as charged. Richard's legal team painted a picture of a man whose selfless act of love had been repaid with deceit. They highlighted the sacrifices he had made, not just the physical toll of donating a kidney, but also the emotional cost of discovering Laura's betrayal. Meanwhile, Laura's lawyers argued that a gift, even one as significant as an organ, could not come with strings attached. They framed Richard's demand as an attempt to punish Laura, rather than a legitimate claim. When the judge finally delivered the verdict, the courtroom fell silent. The court recognizes the emotional hardship Dr. Batista has endured. The judge began, but the law is clear. A kidney donation is a selfless act, not a transaction. It cannot be undone, nor can it be assigned a monetary value. The words hit Richard like a punch to the gut. He sat motionless as the decision sank in, his mind racing with frustration and disbelief. For Richard, the ruling was more than just a legal loss. It felt like the final betrayal in a series of devastating blows. He had sacrificed a part of himself, both literally and figuratively, for a woman who had shattered his trust. Now, not only was he left without his wife, but the court's decision made him feel as though his pain didn't matter. He wasn't just losing the case, he was losing the last shred of justice he had hoped to find. As the courtroom emptied, Richard remained seated, staring at the empty judge's bench. His mind replayed the past few years in vivid detail. The love he had shared with Laura, the surgery, the hope he had felt when she recovered, and the crushing moment when he discovered her infidelity. It wasn't just about the kidney anymore. It was about everything it represented: his love, his sacrifice, and the life he thought they had built together. Dr. Richard's story serves as a painful reminder that even the most selfless acts can be met with betrayal. It's a tale of love, sacrifice, and the devastating consequences of broken trust. And while Richard's scars may never fully heal, his resilience and dedication to moving forward continue to inspire those who hear his story.